On a bitterly cold winter morning, when the fog still clung tightly to car windshields and the sun hadn't yet begun to melt the thin layer of ice on the sidewalk, Malik Johnson was crouched beneath an old delivery truck. His hands were stained with oil, one of his gloves torn at the seam, and an old radio crackled out a vintage tune more out of habit than enjoyment. Malik was always the first to arrive in the small garage on the corner of Riverdale Street, not because he feared being late, but because he needed a few extra hours each day to fix the cars others couldn't afford to bring in. He was 28 years old, black with no college degree or fancy certification, just a pair of skillful hands, a sharp mind and a heart that had never closed itself off to anyone in need. That morning, amid the low rumble of engines, a rattling bicycle noise caught his ear. He looked up and saw an older woman, frail and thin, struggling to pedal a rusty bicycle across the icy pavement. Within seconds, the front wheel caught in a crack, the bike slipped, and she crashed hard onto the curb. Without a second thought, Malik threw his wrench aside and sprinted outside. "Ma'am, are you okay?" His voice softened in the sharp winter air. The older woman trembled, her hands scraped and her eyes brimming with tears, not from pain, but embarrassment. "I just need to get to the pharmacy. My legs aren't what they used to be," she mumbled, her eyes reddened. Malik gently helped her up and guided her inside. He poured her hot coffee from the old crew thermos and inspected the bent and battered bicycle. The chain had slipped completely off, the brakes were broken, and the frame was cracked, making the machine worthless to anyone except for the woman who relied on it to fetch her medicine. He didn't ask her name. He didn't mention money. He bowed his head and tightened each bolt as if he were repairing the most expensive motorcycle of his life. And at that moment, a voice cut through from behind. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "Malik, this ain't a damn charity, Chuck." Renner the garage owner yelled, his voice harsh like a slamming brake. He stood hunched in the doorway, a half-eaten sandwich still in his hand, his narrowed eyes full of scorn. Malik stood up, turned slowly, and replied in a calm tone. "She fell off her bike. I'm just helping her out, then I'll get back to work." Helping Chuck sneered, chewing slowly as if digesting Malik's kindness along with his sandwich. "She's paying you. You think this garage runs on compassion? We're here to make money, not play broke-ass hero." The garage fell into dead silence. Every pair of eyes landed on Malik, who never stopped working when someone needed help. He didn't react. He lowered his head again, fastened the final link of the chain, and then turned to the older woman. "You're all set now, ma'am. You should be able to ride again. But next time, please don't go biking in weather like this." The older woman nodded gently, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, son. No one's ever stopped for me like that." Chuck exploded. "That's it. You're fired right now. Pack your things and get the hell out." Malik stood in silence. He looked around at his co-workers, all staring at the floor, none daring to say a word. Then he removed his oil-stained garage jacket, folded it neatly, and laid it on the bench. He walked out the door alongside the older woman. No job, no backup plan, just his hands and a little warmth left in the coldest winter of his life. The next morning, Malik hadn't slept. He sat beside a cold cup of coffee by the window, thinking about his mother lying in the next room with a prescription he couldn't afford to fill. He thought about his grandfather, who had taught him how to take apart an old radio and help people quietly when no one was watching. Suddenly, the ground gave a slight tremor. Engine sounds echoed from the end of the street. Malik looked up. A sleek black SUV turned onto the road, then another, then 5 more. All identical, luxurious, polished, and silent like a convoy escorting something of great significance. 7 SUVs stopped in front of his house. Each engine shut off at the exact moment with no wasted sound. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains. Some raised their phones and others brought their hands quietly to their mouths. Malik opened the door, not even having time to put on his shoes. The cold morning sun hit him square in the eyes. The first car door opened. A man in a tailored black suit stepped out. He didn't glance around, just locked eyes with Malik and said, "She would like to see you, Malik Johnson." Malik hadn't even had time to react when the rear door of the first SUV swung open. A pair of high heels touched down on the cold, wet pavement. And then the woman stepped out as the same elderly lady he had helped the day before. But now she looked like an entirely different person. The worn grey coat was replaced by an exquisitely tailored ensemble, the collar adorned with a golden phoenix-shaped brooch. Her silver hair was neatly pinned back, her face serene, her eyes bright and her smile as soft as silk. "Good morning, Malik," she said, her voice deep and warm, yet full of quiet power. "May I come in?" Malik stepped back and opened the door. He moved like a sleepwalker, not quite understanding what was happening. Inside the cluttered little house, the woman made no judgment. She sat on the old sofa with the poise of someone who had once sat in rooms where global decisions were made. Malik awkwardly poured her some tea. She gently shook her head and declined, then placed a thick folder on the table. "I never told you who I was," she began. "My name is Regina Langford. You may have heard of Langford Dynamics, which manufactures aerospace systems, satellites, and national defense technologies." Malik's eyes widened. He'd seen that name in the news, one of the largest corporations in America. Its CEO was a mysterious woman, rarely seen in public. Regina continued, "For the past 3 months, I've traveled across the country, disguised as someone homeless, statusless, invisible. I wanted to see whether people were still kind when they didn't know who they were being kind to." She paused for a moment. "You, Malik, were the first and only person to act from the heart. You didn't ask my name. You didn't ask for money. You didn't ask if I was worth your help. You just bent down and helped." Malik sat in silence. His heart pounded not from fear, but from emotion. All his life, he had believed kindness didn't need proof. Yesterday, he'd been fired for that belief. Today, the woman sitting before him was proving he had been right. "I came here," Regina said, "to change your life." She opened the folder. Inside was a formal contract marked with a crisp red seal. "I'd like to offer you the head of mechanical operations position at Langford Dynamics' new research facility. A 6-figure salary. All relocation expenses are covered, full benefits, and your workshop built to your exact specifications, whatever they may be." Malik sat frozen, as if the earth had stopped spinning. He stammered, I don't have an engineering degree. I didn't even finish college." Regina smiled. "That's exactly what makes what you did so extraordinary. Your talent is innate, and your ethics, no one taught you that. You choose them every day." The room fell silent. The contract seemed to glow on the table. Malik looked up at the woman falling off her bike before him. "You have 24 hours to decide," she said gently, "but I think you already know your answer." Then she stood. The early sunlight spilled through the door, catching the gold phoenix brooch like a promise that something would rise from the ashes. The next day, Malik arrived at Langford Dynamics Research Center, a sleek, futuristic compound in a quiet suburban area gleaming like a space station. He still couldn't believe it was real. Doors opened silently. Engineers in white coats passed by, nodding in acknowledgement. Still in his old oil-stained jacket, Malik walked through the glass corridors like a man who had stepped into another world. Regina didn't meet him in the lobby. Instead, a sharp-featured woman in dark business attire and tinted glasses approached Jessica Lane, Regina's assistant. "Good morning, Malik. Please follow me. There's something I think you should see before you decide to sign anything." Jessica led him down a long hallway. Along the walls were dozens of old photos, spacecraft prototypes, images of the first technical team, hands soldering circuits, assembling and repairing. One photo made Malik stop cold. In the faded image, a thin young girl with messy long hair stood beside an older man, his hands covered in grease, beaming with pride. Malik stepped back. His heart thudded in his chest. He knew that man. "That's my grandfather, Otis Johnson." Jessica nodded. "He used to work at a scrapyard more than 40 years ago. Regina says he saved her life." In her office, Regina stood silently by the window as Malik entered. "I knew you'd recognize him," she said softly, not turning around. Malik stepped closer. On her desk sat a small wooden box covered with a delicate cloth, as if it held something sacred. "My grandfather never talked about his past," Malik said, his voice thick. "All I knew was that he lived, simply spoke little, and always told me character shows when no one's watching." Regina turned around, her eyes glistening, but her gaze steady. "When I was 16, my parents died in a car accident. I was homeless for a month, begging, sleeping in parks. On a day colder than I'd ever known, I stumbled into a scrapyard and collapsed in the snow. Your grandfather found me. He didn't ask my name. He didn't question me. He gave me food, shelter, and most importantly, trust." She reached forward and opened the box. Inside was Otis's old toolkit, rusted with age, yet clean and lovingly preserved. An old flashlight rested on top, the initials OJ carved into its handle with a knife. "He gave me this box and said, 'If you learn how to use these the right way, you can change the world.'" She slid the box across the desk toward Malik. "It belongs to you. It has for a long time." Malik opened it. The scent of aged metal, oiled wood, and memory rushed over him as if his grandfather had just stepped out the door that morning. "He never asked for repayment, but I swore, if I ever found someone with his hands, heart, and eyes, I would give them everything." Regina gently placed a hand on Malik's shoulder. "You weren't chosen just for your skill. You are the living legacy of the man who taught me how to stand back up in life." Tears welled in Malik's eyes. He cradled the box to his chest as if holding his grandfather's arms around him again. Outside, the sun had risen. Its rays pierced through the research center's transparent glass walls, illuminating the name carved into the flashlight handle. O.J. Otis Johnson, the man who planted a seed of kindness that bloomed today. After that meeting, Regina took Malik to the research center's lowest floor, a level no engineer was allowed to enter without triple-layered security clearance. The hallway was narrow, lined with cold steel walls, and flickering blue lights followed each step. The air felt different here, quiet, mysterious, almost sacred. Regina didn't say a word. She stopped before a thick steel door, keyed in a code, and scanned her retina. The door made a soft click and then slowly opened, as if revealing something that had been asleep for a long time. Malik stepped inside and gasped. A vehicle or a machine lies in the center of the room. Its body gleamed like a mirror, the design unfamiliar, its curves flowing like a living creature. The silver surface emitted a soft glow, as though the metal was breathing. "This is Project Nova," Regina said, her voice no longer that of a CEO, but a dreamkeeper. "Nearly 40 years ago, your grandfather Otis Johnson sketched the first idea for this car long before the world understood what electric vehicles could become." She walked to a wooden desk in the corner and pulled out an old yellowed hand drawing. "He called it the machine that never dies. a vehicle that could self-repair, run on clean energy, and last for generations. Malik took the drawing, his hands trembling slightly. The lines were unmistakably his grandfather's bold, passionate strokes. Even the most minor details, like an intelligent cooling system, were something most companies hadn't mastered today. "We tried to make it real," Regina continued, "but the technology back then just wasn't ready." The project was shelved and stored under the codename 9OVA. "I kept it here, waiting for the right person." She looked directly at Malik, her eyes reaching into his soul. "And today, I don't want you to finish it. I want you to lead it." Malik stepped back slightly, afraid the dream might shatter in his hands. "I'm just a mechanic," he said quietly. "I've never led a team. I don't know how to run a multi-million-dollar project." Regina smiled, not because he was naive, but because she understood. "Otis once told me, don't trust someone with expensive tools. Trust the person who can turn broken things into something useful." She stepped closer. "I don't need someone who speaks well. I need someone who does right. You've got the hands. You've got the heart. Now you need a place to plant your faith." Malik turned to face Project Nova's vehicle as if staring into his future. A future his grandfather had drawn, that Regina had safeguarded, and that now was in his hands. He took a deep breath. For the first time in his life, his dream wasn't just to fix something broken, but to build something that made fixing obsolete. Regina placed a hand on his shoulder, light like a vow. "You won't be alone. I'll be by your side. And when Nova is complete, the world will know the name Malik Johnson, not as a mechanic, but as the man who revived a dream." Malik nodded, not because he was sure, but because he was given the chance to be for the first time. The workshop, built deep within the research facility, was crafted precisely based on Malik's hand-drawn sketches from a sleepless night. It was a vast open space with light pouring from above like a stage, but instead of spectators, there were only machines, blueprints, and hope. In one corner, Otis's old toolbox sat quietly, covered not only in the dust of time, but in memories and responsibility. On the first day of Project Nova, Malik stood still for a long time before the vehicle's body, lying dormant on the floor like a creature waiting to awaken. He touched its metallic surface, cold, smooth, full of potential. No one rushed him, no clocks ticking, no shift sirens. Here Malik worked to the rhythm of his heartbeat. He clipped his grandfather's old flashlight to the pocket on his chest and began. Day became night, night became day. Malik lived in the workshop more than at home. He skipped lunch, missed texts, and stopped caring about social media or the world outside. There was only Nova and the old words of Otis whispering in his ears, to build something with a soul. Don't just use tools, use your heart. He ran into miscalculations, burnt circuits, and desynchronized motors. One night, a section of the vehicle exploded from a programming flaw, and Malik wept silently on the workshop floor. But he never gave up. He remembered the image of the older woman falling off her bicycle, the gratitude in her eyes, and the day he was fired for doing the right thing. And he lowered his head and started over piece by piece. Regina often stood behind the glass watching him quietly. She never interfered. She believed that people like Malik didn't need instruction. They just required trust. And then one day, when the sunlight just kissed the edge of the workshop's glass, Malik fastened the final bolt, closed the engine housing, and pressed the ignition switch. The machine let out its first sound. A soft hum, not loud, not flashy, like the heartbeat of something coming alive. Engineers gathered around, breath held. Malik stepped to the driver's seat, touched the control panel, and guided Nova off the testing pedestal. The car glided over the floor as if it weren't touching it. Malik steered, accelerated, then gently stopped it in the center of the test chamber. He stepped out, said nothing. But his eyes were wet. The room erupted, not because the car moved, but because something greater had happened. Nova lived, and Malik had brought it to life. That very day, Langford Dynamics issued a brief press release. Project Nova has been revived under the leadership of Chief Engineer Malik Johnson, a talent born not from academia, but from belief. On social media, the name Malik Johnson began to appear, but he didn't care. In his heart, only one truth rang clear. Grandpa, I did it. Less than a week after its successful test run, the first Nova prototype sent shockwaves through the media. A vehicle powered entirely by clean energy with a self-healing exterior, an autonomous processing system that required no driver, and above all, built under the leadership of a mechanic who had never attended college. The name Malik Johnson appeared in the headlines of hundreds of articles. The garage mechanic behind the tech that will change the world. Kindness took him where no one expected. A modern-day fairy tale that all started with a rusty bike. Every central TV station wanted an interview. Tech startups flooded him with partnership offers. Universities invited him to speak as an honorary guest. But Malik wasn't swayed by the spotlight. He still wore his old oil-stained jacket and walked in scuffed shoes. He turned down most invitations except for one, the Future Technology Conference in Atlanta, where some of the world's greatest minds gathered. That day, he stood alone on stage, no PowerPoint technical diagrams or flashy 3D visuals, just his voice and the truth. 3 months ago, Malik began his voice deep but steady. I was fired for fixing an old bicycle for a woman who couldn't pay. The audience was silent. It wasn't a heroic story. I didn't do it expecting anything in return. I did it because if I hadn't stopped to help her that day, I wouldn't be the man my grandfather raised me to be. Total silence. I spent my youth in the shadows of people who thought an engineer needed a degree, and that being smart meant knowing technical jargon. But I'm here to tell you that sometimes what sparks a revolution is an old wrench, a kind heart, and someone who believes in you when no one else does. Thousands stood. The applause thundered and echoed like a storm. After the talk, a man in a grey suit approached and extended his hand. I'm Marcus Reynolds, CEO of TerraVault, the largest clean energy firm in the country. Project Nova is what we've dreamed of for over a decade. And Malik, we want to bring Nova to every city in America. Malik looked at him, then out across the slowly emptying room. What he saw was something bigger than technology. He saw a flicker of trust being restored, not just in himself, but in every person who'd ever believed they weren't smart enough, worthy enough, or chosen. As the stage cleared, he stepped onto the balcony where the golden sunset painted the sky. He pulled from his chest pocket the old flashlight engraved with OJ. Gazing out into the horizon, he whispered, "Grandpa, I'm not done yet, I'm just getting started." In the week that followed the conference, the world shifted. From the small streets of Detroit to technical colleges in Chicago to old repair shops in the Deep South, Malik Johnson became a symbol not of technology, but there is hope. People shared the story of the young man fired for helping an older woman. It was retold hundreds of times through podcasts, animated videos, and late-night radio shows. And with each telling, it didn't lose power. It just touched one more heart. At the Langford Research Center, Nova was redesigned into 3 commercial prototypes, set to begin real-world testing within 6 months. Malik wasn't sitting in an executive office. He was in the workshop, hands still greasy, kneeling beside the second car, adjusting its wiring harness. Jessica, Regina's assistant, approached with a folder in hand but said nothing at first. She watched him work. "What's going on?" Malik asked, not looking up. Jessica smiled. "Regina just finalized the official name for Nova's global commercial launch." He paused. "What is it?" She handed him the paper, printed in bold, the Otis Initiative. Malik froze. His hands trembled. His throat tightened. Jessica whispered, "She wants the world to know that it all began with a man who wasn't famous, didn't have a degree, and never had his name on a wall, just a toolbox and a heart that never closed." One afternoon, Regina called Malik to her office. She stood by the window just like the day they met. "You've come further than I ever imagined," she said, "and I'm proud that you haven't let anything change who you are." Malik sat silently. Regina pulled out an envelope. "This is the Global Development Blueprint, but before I hand it to you, I want to show you one final thing." She led him down one more level, a floor only 3 people in the company had access to. The final steel door opened. Inside was a space straight out of a sci-fi film. On the central platform was a completely new vehicle. Its design was sharp, and pulses of soft blue light ran along its frame like a heartbeat. Next to the car was a blueprint. The ink faded with age, but in the lower left corner a familiar mark remained: OJ. Model Infinity. Malik stood frozen. "This was your grandfather's unfinished project," Regina said. "He called it the final dream. And I believe you should be the one to finish it." He stepped forward and gently touched the car's surface. For the first time, tears streamed down his face, not from pressure or pride, but from feeling connected to the most sacred thing in his life. That night, Malik stood on the workshop's balcony, staring at a sky full of stars. In his hand was no wrench, no blueprint, just the old flashlight carved with OJ, still glowing, still alive. He thought of his grandfather, who lived quietly and kindly, and planted a seed without needing to see its blooming day. "Grandpa, I didn't just fix a car. I'm fixing how people see each other." A gentle breeze passed by. Somewhere in the distance it felt like a familiar, raspy laugh, and the warmth of a hand resting on his shoulder like it did when he was a boy. Malik smiled. The new project had only begun, but the old mechanic was still here, simple, silent, and never stopping believing that true strength is being trusted exactly when you're still learning to trust yourself.